He looked very unlike himself as he stepped back into Mr. Van Broeklyns's presence, and he was only partially reassured when that gentleman protested that there was no real harm in the drug, and that Mr. Spielhagen would be all right if left to wake naturally and without shock. However, as his present attitude was one of great discomfort, they decided to carry him back and lay him on the library lounge. But before doing this, Mr. Upjohn drew from his flaccid grasp the precious manuscript, and carrying it into the larger room, placed it on a remote table, where it remained undisturbed till Mr. Spielhagen, suddenly coming to himself at the end of some 15 minutes, missed the sheets from his hand, and bounding up, crossed the room to repossess himself of them. His face, as he lifted them up and rapidly ran through them with ever-accumulating anxiety, told them what they had to expect. The page containing the formula was gone. Violet now saw her problem. Part 2. There was no doubt about the loss I have mentioned. All could see that page 13 was not there. In vain a second handling of every sheet. The one so numbered was not to be found. Page 14 met the eye on the top of the pile, and page 12 finished it off at the bottom, but no page 13 in between or anywhere else. Where had it vanished, and through whose agency had this misadventure occurred? No one could say, or at least no one there made any attempt to do so, though everybody started to look for it. But where look? The adjoining small room offered no facilities for hiding a cigar end, much less a square of shining white paper. Bare walls, a bare floor, and a single chair for furniture comprised all that was to be seen in this direction. Nor could the room in which they then stood be thought to hold it, unless it was on the person of some one of them. Could this be the explanation of the mystery? No man looked his doubts, but Mr. Cornell, possibly divining the general feeling, stepped up to Mr. Van Broeklyn, and in a cool voice, but with the red burning hotly on either cheek, said, so as to be heard by everyone present, "I demand to be searched, at once and thoroughly." A moment's silence, then the common cry, "We will all be searched." "Is Mr. Spielhagen sure that the missing page was with the others when he sat down in the adjoining room to read his thesis?" asked their perturbed host. "Very sure," came the emphatic reply. "Indeed, I was just going through the formula itself when I fell asleep." "You are ready to assert this?" "I am ready to swear it." Mr. Cornell repeated his request. "I demand that you make a thorough search of my person. I must be cleared, and instantly, of every suspicion," he gravely asserted, "or how can I marry Miss Digby tomorrow?" After that there was no further hesitation. One and all subjected themselves to the ordeal suggested, even Mr. Spielhagen. But this effort was as futile as the rest. The lost page was not found. What were they to think? What were they to do? There seemed to be nothing left to do, and yet some further attempt must be made towards the recovery of this important formula. Mr. Cornell's marriage and Mr. Spielhagen's business success both depended upon its being in the latter's hands before 6 in the morning, when he was engaged to hand it over again to a certain manufacturer sailing for Europe on an early steamer. 5 hours! Had Mr. Van Broeklyn a suggestion to offer? No, he was as much at sea as the rest. Simultaneously look crossed look. Blankness was on every face. "Let us call the ladies," suggested one. It was done, and however great the tension had been before, it was even greater when Miss Digby stepped upon the scene. But she was not a woman to be shaken from her poise even by a crisis of this importance. When the dilemma had been presented to her and the full situation grasped, she looked first at Mr. Cornell and then at Mr. Spielhagen, and quietly said, "There is but one explanation possible of this matter. Mr. Spielhagen will excuse me, but he is evidently mistaken in thinking that he saw the lost page among the rest. The condition into which he was thrown by the unaccustomed drug he had drank made him liable to hallucinations. I have not the least doubt he thought he had been studying the formula at the time he dropped off to sleep. I have every confidence in the gentleman's candour, but so have I in that of Mr. Cornell," she supplemented with a smile. An exclamation from Mr. Van Broecklyn and a subdued murmur from all but Mr. Spielhagen testified to the effect of this suggestion, and there is no saying what might have been the result if Mr. Cornell had not hurriedly put in this extraordinary and most unexpected protest. "Miss Digby has my gratitude," said he, "for a confidence which I hope to prove to be deserved. But I must say this for Mr. Spielhagen. He was correct in stating that he was engaged in looking over his formula when I stepped into his presence with the glass of cordial. If you were not in a position to see the hurried way in which his hand instinctively spread itself over the page he was reading, I was. And if that does not seem conclusive to you, then I feel bound to state that in unconsciously following this movement of his, I plainly saw the number written on the top of the page, and that number was 13. A loud exclamation, this time from Spielhagen himself, announced his gratitude and corresponding change of attitude toward the speaker. "Wherever that damned page has gone," he protested, advancing towards Cornell with outstretched hand, "you have nothing to do with its disappearance." Instantly all constraint fled, and every countenance took on a relieved expression. But the problem remained. Suddenly those very words passed someone's lips, and with their utterance Mr. Upjohn remembered how, at an extraordinary crisis in his own life, he had been helped, and an equally difficult problem settled, by a little lady secretly attached to a private detective agency. If she could only be found and hurried here before morning, all might yet be well. He would make the effort. Such wild schemes sometimes work. He telephoned to the office and... Was there anything else Miss Strange would like to know? End of the first part of Missing Page 13 by Anna Catherine Green.